So the big question is this: how do investors like us who don't have a PhD in finance or millions to start investing, how do we grow our bank accounts to build real savings in retirements and yet still have the time to do what we really love? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer.
Guys, John Mooney of this podcast. I hope you're excited. This is the coolest thing ever. It's super, super fun. It's like fall now, and like all the trees are like de-leafing. Fall is always so quick. At least it was in North Carolina. It is here, so I don't know. But I was reading the 80-20 principle today, which is like so amazing. And I came across this one example they had that totally reminded me of a very, very, very similar example in Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and I was just like so perplexed by it. And I want to talk about it because I think it's so powerful. And it's this concept of like having just a slight advantage in the marketplace, and how that advantage, like with the power of compound growth, can just like literally explode exponentially over time, which is so powerful and so key. So here's the example in the 80-20 principle. Okay, they talk about this idea, and obviously, it's sort of tailored towards 80% of results come from 20% of the effort, or some sort of form of that. But the key here was this idea of two goldfish, right? And they're both like, baby goldfish, I guess. And one of the goldfish starts out just a little bit larger than the other goldfish. And so because of that little teeny advantage, as they're growing up, this larger goldfish can eat just a little bit more food than the smaller goldfish. And as they grow and they grow and they grow, this disadvantage starts to also grow and grow and grow and grow, right? So the bigger goldfish eats more and more food over time than the smaller goldfish. And after, a couple of years, the big goldfish just dwarfs the little goldfish, who's like a little teeny baby at this point, versus this big, massive monster goldfish, because the bigger goldfish could always eat just a little bit more food. And so if it got maybe, say, 60% or 80% of the food every time that the fish got fed, it was going to, grow so much faster than the other fish who couldn't get that food. And it started out maybe as a smaller difference. Maybe it was like 55-45 at the beginning, but it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows over time. Even though it starts out small, it becomes huge in the future, right? It's this idea of compound growth. You start out with a small advantage, or you start out with a small portfolio, then it grows and it grows and it grows and it starts to grow so much faster, and you have like that growth, right? Because at the end, if you have this giant fish versus this little tiny fish, after all this, unfair feeding, essentially what you're looking at here is a total like difference, right? So, this fish is now eating 80 or 90% of the food, and the other one's only eating 10%. And so it's going to grow so much faster than the smaller fish. And it all starts with a small advantage when they're growing up. And so I was thinking about this concept, I just read it, and I was like, dude, wow. And I was thinking about this example in Outliers, and like, oh my gosh. So in Outliers, he talks about the same idea, except he kind of applies it to people in sports, right? And so he looks at like professional hockey players, and it's so crazy because like he is looking at like trends in Canadian professional hockey, since they're like the best players in the world pretty much. And he realizes that a statistical majority of the players that are in the pro league were born in the first 3 months of the year, and a vast majority of them were born in like the first couple of weeks of the year. 80% of them really did come from that first couple of months in the year. So idea of the 80%, 80-20 principle, right? And so most of the professional players were born in the first couple of months of the year. And so he's like, why is that? Why does that happen? What could influence that? And so he's doing all this research, trying to figure out what's actually going on here. What could cause this shift? What could cause this mindset change? And what could really make these kids have just a huge advantage over like everybody else? And he's thinking, and he realizes that the season starts on January 1st. And as kids are growing up, they have to be like 7 or 10 or 12 to join the leagues, right? And so what happens is you have like these 7-year-old kids. They can't play until they're a certain age, right? And so the people that have birthdays very, very, very close to the beginning of the year are going to be just a little bit older than the people that have birthdays, say, in, September or October or December. There's a very, very, very small number of professional players in hockey in Canada that were born in December, because they essentially are starting out a year behind the people that were born in January, because they can join it. They're going to be like essentially a year older or 6 to 12 months older than these other players, right? 4 to 12 months older even. And so what happens is like a year isn't like a big difference, right? And if you think about a portfolio, right, like people start out with small amounts of money, maybe start with like a couple $100, and like a couple $100 isn't a lot of money, and I hear that a lot. And here's the interesting part though: as they grow and they grow and they grow, what happens as they're getting coached, right? At the beginning, it might just be like 7-year-olds and 6-year-olds, or 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds, or 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds playing together. But the coaches on these hockey teams, especially these youth hockey teams, whether they mean to or not, they're going to give most of their attention, most of their praise, most of their coaching to the kids who perform the best, right? And so at the beginning, these kids that are just a little bit older than their counterparts, they perform just a little bit better than they do. And so they get just a little bit more time out there on the rink than the ones who are sitting in the box for just a little bit more time because they're not as good, right? And it's not that they're like a big difference, but there's a small difference just because these kids are a little bit older. And so because of that, they're more developed, mostly men here. So like, more muscle. And so they get more time on the field. And because they get more time on the field, they get more time in practice. They get more training. They get more attention. And they get more... they are trained harder and to greater extents, greater durations than others. And I mean, guys, if you want to get good at anything, like I dropped my 5K time by 10, 20, 15 minutes. Like, how do you get better at sports, right? You get better at sports by what? Doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, right? I mean, that's all you have to do, right? Like, if you want to get better at cross country, you just run. It's if you want to get better at lifting, you just lift. It's not like a complex formula. And so it's the same thing with these kids, right? The kids who played hockey more because they were just a little bit better, all of a sudden they started to get significantly better over time than these kids who were maybe not given as much attention. And what's that do? Well, it deters those other kids, right? And so the ones with less attention, they are sort of pushed to do less, right? And so as practice goes on after, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, you have to have this big expanding compounding curve of difference between these two groups, right? And the kids who are just a little bit better at the beginning are now like exponentially better because they're getting way more attention and way more focus. And so it gets to the point where there's such a huge gap in performance, such a huge difference, that the kids who didn't get as much attention because they weren't preferred at the beginning, when they were young, they're going to feel super bad and like really not going to enjoy the sport as much as the kids who are getting all the attention and winning all the games and playing all the star spots. They're going to get an insane boost of confidence, right? An insane, bam, pow, right? Because with sports, so much of it is it's confidence, I remember some of the best races I ran, absolutely crushed my PRs and had amazing times. I think a lot of it was because of confidence, because both my parents were there. And it's like, my gosh, like it only happened a couple of times, but you could tell like when it happened, like confidence explodes and performance follows. And so it's this self-fulfilling prophecy that grows and grows and grows over time and creates this idea of, 80-20, like 20% of the players are going to get 80% of the results because they have that focus on them, which is like, so interesting. It's also crazy. I'm thinking like how you can apply this to portfolios. And then I realized that, I was thinking about people Donald Trump started out with like a small loan of $1 million. And so it's this idea of like where you start out with when you're investing, right? And especially if you have like to work through your compound interest curve and you're working to grow that portfolio over time. How do you, overcome maybe at the beginning if you're at a little bit of a disadvantage, right? Maybe you're not starting out.
Want more stock market secrets? If so, go get your free copy of my best-selling book, 9 to Noon. You can get your free copy plus $11,176 of unannounced bonuses it took me years to uncover, completely for free at 9tonoonsecrets.com. Inside 9 to Noon, you'll find the top 38 secrets you can use to double your portfolio every 2 years and make upwards of 10% per trade daily.